I'm Rahana Awan. I'm co-chair of the Black Minority Ethnic Staff Network here at the OU. We've got SAS here today as well. You've got me chairing the event. This is an event that the staff network has put on together with Open Learn and the Race and Ethnicity Hub, and we're building on some articles that colleagues from South Asia who work at the OU have very kindly written and are on Open Learn, and hopefully you've had a chance to have a look at those already today. So today's panel discussion will explore the experiences of some of our members of staff, and what I'd like to do is just hand over to them to say hello and to introduce themselves, because they always do it better than I can do, and then we'll talk a little bit about South Asian Heritage Month. I will then ask the panelists to talk a bit about the articles they've written, and then please do post any questions that you have in the chat box, and SAS is very kindly keeping an eye on the chat box. Okay, Dev, are you okay? Would you like to go first and introduce yourself, because you're on my top left of my screen?
Okay, thank you, Rehana. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dev Khodwani, Executive Dean in the Faculty of Business and Law. Pleased to meet you all this year.
Fabulous, thank you. And Ruxana?
Hi, Rehana, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ruxana Malik. I'm a business process owner at the moment in the exams and assignment program.
And has Sudesh joined us yet?
No, but I have WhatsApped him and he's typing, so I assume he's
Excellent.
frantically trying to get in contact somehow, but I assume he'll be with us shortly.
Okay, no worries. So thank you everybody for joining us today. So this is a new event. This is the first time the network has organised anything around South Asian Heritage Month. South Asian Heritage Month itself is only 3 years old, and it sets out to celebrate the journeys of those people who have come from South Asia, mainly Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal, Pakistan, the Maldives and Sri Lanka. This year, it focused on 2 key themes. So it's the 75th anniversary of independence of India and the partition and the creation of Pakistan, and also the 50th anniversary of the expulsion of Ugandan Asians from Uganda by Idi Amin. So we're very, very lucky today to have 3 esteemed panelists join us, as you hear, from different roles across the university. And thank you so much for your articles and for joining us. So what I'd like to do to start off with, if that's okay, Dev, is come to you so that you can give us a bit of a summary of your article. And if anybody hasn't had a chance to read them, Sas, do you want to just quickly stick them in the chat box for colleagues as well, so that they're there for them?
I will. So I've just heard from Sudesh, and unfortunately his son's been taken ill.
Oh no,
So
okay.
he's had to go to hospital. So the event might end up being a bit shorter than we had originally planned, but we've got the hour anyway. But just to let everyone know, unfortunately he won't be able to make it today.
No problem, and please do pass our best on to him and his son. I hope everything's okay. Hopefully it's not this extreme heat we're having. So Dev, can I come to you then? Can you summarize your article for us, please?
Thanks, Rehana. I mean, when SAS approached me whether I could write something or share something to make South Asian Heritage Day something that we could all, come together and discuss about South Asia, our heritage, I really was at loss of ideas. And then a thought occurred to me that, look, people think about South Asian parents as tyrants, that they put their children through excruciating effort to do well in the exams, to do well in the universities, to aspire for the best things in the world, and push them hard to realize those ambitions and so on. And my personal experience is somewhat different than that image that sometimes we have about South Asian parents. Even though half my time, I must say that half of my life I have lived in India, and then other half has been here, there, and everywhere in the UK and so on. So I can consider myself to be a parent who would have been conditioned by at least the Indian mindset, if not South Asian, and therefore to with sense of authenticity what I experience as a parent, and whether that perceived stereotyping of the parental behavior is justified. Now, I am not an academic in sociology or anthropology or such studies where I can comment really with empirical evidence. But I thought I'll make it personal and share, and then it will be nice to have views from colleagues. So that was a kind of a motivation to see whether I could challenge some of these stereotypical kind of images that we build about other colleagues, other communities as we live through our lives. So in the article, I really narrate what my approach has been. And here I can talk a bit more if colleagues have questions, but in the article, I focus mostly my parental behavior as participating in education of my children. So I and my wife, we have 2 children, both of them are boys. And one is now working, he's 29 years old, other is 20 years old, and he's in the university, as I said in the article, and just is still completing his undergraduate degree. So my own, so I suspect some of my approach to education might have been influenced by my own upbringing. I grew up in effectively what was a refugee camp after the partition of India. It's interesting you mentioned independence of India and creation of Pakistan, Rehana. But for me, for my grandfather, it was displacement from their homeland. And then they got scattered all over India and outside. The people from what was part of Pakistan, India, now part of Pakistan, Sindh region. And they found themselves on the outskirts of a Midwestern city in Ahmedabad, where there was no facility or anything, probably some empty barracks that were left over by paramilitary forces. So I grew up in a almost benign, neglected, carefree streets in terms of my own educational experience, because parents were busy trying to make 2 ends meet. So I had this growing up experience of me being a kind of a school that you could not call school at that time or even today. But there was this fantastic school of life through which I went through and came to appreciate there is a lot more to formal education than just school going. And, I did not even know there was something called elite schools. But only when I grew up, I understood what this means difference-wise. So the part of my approach to parenting has been influenced by my own experience as a learner, partly also by the fact that economic realities of society in which you grow up and experience the role of education in terms of getting you settled, at least economically, occupationally. So I was very aware of the importance of education, but I never kind of put any pressure on my children in terms of whichever school they went to be in the top 5 or something like that. Never. And also I did not really worry about the choice of schools, even though we had choice when I was raising elder one in India. People used to send them to very expensive private schools and so on. We went to the local one, whichever it was. And here when we came, I did not bother the nearest school that we found in the OU, near OU actually. They went there. So, and some colleagues did ask me, particularly social reference groups did ask me, why are you not worried about if, they are 11 plus or such things? But I think my being in teaching profession for a number of years and having appreciated the importance of the normal growth of a child that they have experience of diverse cultures, be open to ideas and experiences. I didn't want them to go into a very exclusive kind of a setting where they would only see particular type of children coming from particular type of families. So that was a guiding principle for me. And also there is now obviously reinforced by a lot of research in neuroscience that range is important. The multiple variety of experiences that as you're growing up is important. So I had that carefree, relaxed relationship with my children in terms of education. Both have done well so far, but I did not know whether they'll do that well. It was really me trying to get them a normal life and happy childhood, because I think those things go a long way in your life to lead a balanced life. And education, yes, you will do well, but if you thought when you join an occupation something is important, you need to learn, you would learn that. So I was coming from that angle in relation to educational choices and influence that I had on my children. And I'm happy to say that they have done well, but I did not know that they would do well. Occupationally, also, elder one is doing very well. So but that is where I come from, a relaxed approach, which is not normally what is associated with the South Asian parent.
Thank you, Dev. That was a really lovely summary. And actually, just to pick up on the thing about, I was really careful in the choice of language, because even on the South Asian Heritage website, it talks about an anniversary, not a celebration of partition and independence because of the displacement. And I think that's really, really important. And the reason I also wanted to mention that today is because obviously you talked about your refugee experience in your article. And obviously that must have informed, as you said, where you are today, and also how you've brought your children up. I'm hoping that there are going to be some questions, so please do start to think about your questions and pop them into the chat box, and then we'll come back to you, Dev, in a moment after we've heard from Ruxana to summarise her article. But thank you for that, Dev.
Shall I go?
Yes, please.
Thank you. So mine really came out of the Black Lives Matter movement, and when that had started, a lot of articles, a lot of chat was happening on the BME network that we've got at the OU, and it started off with an article that Ola Faduju put together called Black Lives Matter in Sport 2, What is the BAME Experience of Sport in the UK? And the article was really, really interesting. And when he shared it, we had a conversation around, wow, that was your experience, and this was my experience. So somebody contacted me and said, well, would you like to put an article together, and we can sort of navigate and help you with that. So yes, so Simon Rea helped me. He was my editor, and I put an article together about women in sport, particularly Muslim women in sport, because I mean, I was born in Milton Keynes. I was born in Bletchley, and my parents, like you, Dev, they spent all their time trying to make ends meet. My mum, she was illiterate. She sewed jackets for a living. My dad, he worked on the railways, and literally we never saw him. I don't think I saw him till like I was 8, because he was working all the shifts up and down the country, whatever he could get. So but one thing about my dad was he was very women, girls, everybody should be into everything. So I'm one of 5 children, and he bought us bikes, he took us swimming. He said, like, and you can do anything, just go for it. But as we and being born in and growing up in Bletchley in particular, which was an extremely difficult experience. There was a lot of racism. We were one of the very few Asian families there. Just down the road we had a black family, and we kind of understood each other. That was hard. There were times when you thought, oh, I'm fed up just through the experiences that you go through. But it started off for me swimming at school. So as a Muslim, I need to cover up, I have my modesty to maintain. So I went swimming with these bright yellow leggings, and everyone was looking at me. I was like, okay, but I just wanted to swim. So for me, it was about getting in the pool, and I did really well. Swimming was my thing. Swimming's always been my thing, actually. And so growing up, it's become a bit harder, because in Milton Keynes, I don't know, in other spaces, you don't have women only swimming lessons, or they're at different times. They're in the evening, or they're during the early morning when you're working. So it's trying to find that balance. So my article's about, number one, about swimming. It also references funny little things about, as we grew up, my mum used to sew our clothes. So we used to go to school in bright clothes, we had sequins on some things, and everybody used to just take the mick out of us, call us names and whatnot. So it makes me laugh these days, because when you go out to buy things, everything's bright, sparkly, different colours, and you've got this tanning aisle. You know, people go and choose the color they want to be because they want to be, want to be darker skinned. And so I have a reference of that in my article as well. And then a serious bit in my article is about, well, what is happening with women, Muslim women in sports. And the Sport England, they did a whole piece about looking at women, Muslim women in sport. And sadly, we don't fare well. There are a lot of women out there who I know, they can't ride a bike, they don't know how to swim, just because they've never been exposed to those sorts of things. And for me, it's about creating space. I mean, when I had my daughter, my oldest daughter, I wanted to get fit. And a lot of women that I knew didn't want to share spaces with men. They were saying, no, I want to, all I said was, a lot of children were born at that age. You make friends and you think, okay, let's go somewhere just to de-stress and exercise. And we couldn't find anywhere. So I ended up booking I don't know if any of you are aware of Milton Keynes Academy near Saffron Way. So I ended up booking a hall in there, and I paid for it myself. I just said, look, here's the hall. There's only one exit entrance in the hall. So if you want to join me, come and join me. And we had the hall split into two. We had basketball on one side and badminton on the other. And I'm no basketball expert. I just thought it would be a nice game to play. And they had the two rings. And as it happened, so many women contacted me, said, yeah, I'd love to come. We didn't have any rules. We kind of, there was one point, I think we all fell on the floor with this ball as we wrestled it out of each other's hands. And it was just I need to let off steam moment, really. And we just fell about giggling. So it really is about that social connection as well, creating social spaces for women. I think with Muslim women, we have our challenges. It doesn't help that sometimes we don't encourage our children to go swimming because we have our own reservations, and that can be sort of pigeonholed into different cultures as well. So you might be a Muslim, but you might be a really, really rigid Muslim from, I don't know, let's say Somalia or somewhere, who says, right, you're not allowed to do that, you're not allowed to do that. Or you might have somebody like, somebody who's quite casual, said, you're young, go swimming, don't worry about protocol and all of that. At least learn the skill, because everybody needs to really learn to swim. It's a life-saving skill as well as a recreational activity. So that's about my article.
Thank you, Roxana. Again, I mean, that whole kind of, the thing that you're talking about there that really resonated with me was this idea of challenging stereotypes, actually. And that came through, I think, in Dev's article as well. And I know Sudesh looks at whitewashing and recruitment. So the idea of having to change your name in order to get a job, and whether or not we should be doing that, or actually standing up, which you're being commended for in the chat box, actually, Roxana. And I have to say, all three of the articles for me personally really resonated at different levels. So Dev, I thought about my own experience growing up in the UK and my parents and what their expectations were, and how my sister and I used to joke that we may be disappointments to them because I did social sciences and she did history. but they were very supportive of that. So I will ask a question to get us started, and I'd like to know, Dev, where do you think that stereotype comes from about South Asian parents being these pushy parents that want their children to be doctors or lawyers or whatever, this kind of, that they must go on and get, doctorates and all that kind of thing? Where do you think that stereotype comes from?
From pre-independence time. That's my view. If you look at the history and read about the engagement of white people in pre-partition, pre-independence days, the hierarchy of occupations, already big hierarchical caste-based society, South Asia, particularly India, which is an evil in itself. But what was reinforced was the education system that encouraged and put Indian civil service on top of the pile as the nirvana for your professional achievement, which people had to compete at until today in India, and maybe so in Pakistan, I don't know. but Indian civil service is considered to be the epitome. That's the best thing you can achieve for your parents. And so those things were started from there, in my opinion, that you come to value certain occupations over others. And obviously the privilege that comes with that, once you get into becoming a doctor or an engineer or a civil servant, then kind of reinforces that feedback loop in the society. So people come to value those occupations more. So partly that starts there. Perhaps it was completely unintended by the British, who were discriminating white and Indian brown people in the civil services. But then it reinforced that message. Oh, he was ICS in British time, kind of a thing. I have grown hearing those kind of things from the families of those ICS people, that he was ICS in British time. So that hierarchical view of the occupations comes from there, which was quite natural in the cost-ridden society that India is. And then when they come out, obviously they tend to use the same mindset to support children to go through, because they haven't explored too much of other options. And this is kind of a quicker and shorter route seen to professional success. So they have reinforced that in some of their choices. But then their perception is because not everybody becomes doctor, not everybody becomes engineer, but that perception then prevails because they come out good in school grades and so on. I don't think that has anything special to do with parents. It is probably more established explanation for that. Might be that a professional family will have children who are more likely to succeed, and there is empirical evidence for that. So that might explain more than just because people are brown.
I think your answer, and I think Aisha says it in the chat box, it's so interesting to hear. And actually one of the things that really, again, really impacted me, Deb, with what you were saying is we talk about decolonizing all the time. We talk about decolonizing the university, we talk about decolonizing the curriculum, but there's actually something around that's really important about decolonizing ourselves. Because actually what we all need to do, irrespective of what the color of our skin is, our background, our education, whatever, is we need to look at where our own information has come from, how the decisions that we make are informed by those things that have gone on before us, and how we can break that conditioning. And actually the place to start with decolonizing is with ourselves, because we also have those that conditioning that informs our decision making, and it's important for change to break that.
Yeah, and I think it goes two ways, Anna. So when I went to do PhD in Manchester in the early 90s, first time, and I used to hear words like Paki there in the buses, which has gone down now significantly when I go back to Manchester. My supervisor, who was a middle-aged white, but I could not have dreamt of a better supervisor, said, you Indians are very good at numeracy, and so do some quantitative research. You will be good at it anyway. I said, no, not anyway. I was actually thrown out from my standard 9th in the A-level equivalent or GCSE equivalent by my science teacher, that I should not take science because I was poor in maths. But he had this assumption that somehow because I'm from India, I will be good with numbers. I don't think there is much in that argument. The reason is I'm actually very good with arithmetic and mental arithmetic and so on, not because I was any superior to anyone else, but because you go and buy vegetables in the market, you are doing all the times arithmetic. And I used to compete with my vegetable vendor that who would come up with the right sum that I had to pay, because you will buy 10 different vegetables, 250 grams of that, half a kilo of that, different prices per kilo. And by the time he would finish the last item, I would give him the money. And then we used to compete. And if I got the right sum, he will give me 10 paisa free, discount. So that is how my maths became, arithmetic became. So there are many ways people learn. So I don't think that brown or Chinese people have any better, superior numerical ability. Then it's just the way you grow up in society and what kind of challenges society throws at you that we pick up certain skills better than others. Stereotyping, I think, is not helpful in that. One should look at what is the scientific reason behind it, sociological reason behind it, and then appreciate rather than stereotype.
Absolutely, and the importance of Also breaking those narratives, so recognizing when the narratives are positive, but also recognizing when those narratives are damaging and start to become limiting for people. Thank you, Dev. I've probably asked enough. I'm going to ask, I have got other questions for Roxana, but I'm going to open it up to the floor and see if anybody else would like to ask a question either to Dev or to Roxana.
Hi. So no, we've got loads of kind of really positive comments coming through in the chat. It's really interesting where there's parallels and overlap, but no specific questions. So if people don't mind, I might maybe jump in and ask maybe Dev a couple of questions, and then maybe I've got one or two for Roxana later on. So Dev, I was just wondering, at any point in time, did you ever worry about your child's future academically, or were there other members of the family who kind of disagreed with your approach?
Very good question, Sas. So, I mean, there wasn't much disagreement in the family because here we are just my wife and our two children. Of course, if we were back in India, we would be part of much larger family, and we were until we came here. So I wasn't worried. First question is whether I was worried about their academic achievement. I wasn't too worried if they did not get, into top 5% of the school or classes. I would worry if they were not paying attention to studies, because again, source of my worry would be not that they are not paying attention to studies. If they are not paying attention to studies, what are they paying attention to in place of the studies? Because that is where as a parent, I would be concerned what kind of habits are they picking up or spending time on, and those could be not necessarily very helpful in life. So that kind of a concern, that from that point of view, I would like to take interest in their studies. I would ask how are things going, but never sit down with them and monitor on a monthly basis or something like that. In terms of disagreement, I and my wife had slight different view when they were in the age of around what you call here 11 plus exams. So she thought and discussed even with boys whether they would like to do. They said no. She for a moment said, shall we not persuade them to do it? I said no, leave them. And that's the only minor difference of opinion we had. But then she is very understanding and a lot of confidence in boys. We wanted to go with what they wanted to do rather than what we wanted them to do. In terms of choice of what they would do with the studies or what kind of studies they want to do. I mean, I remember my elder son shifting between being engineer to computer scientist to mathematician. And you can see the child, it's a joy of parenting that you see how a teenage mind processes information. So I remember elder's inspiration to become engineer was because back home, my uncles and other wider family have construction business. So he would go and see big buildings being constructed. So he'll go and joke with my uncle, say, look, I'm going to make a bigger, taller building than you. And that kind of got into his subconscious. But he kept changing. I said, look, do what you want. Even if you become a poet, I'm perfectly fine with it. So I don't think I had worried about at all about their future in terms of occupation. At all. Maybe it was a risky thing to do, but that's what I did.
Thank you very much, Dev. And I'm going to just jump in, Roxana, but a couple of questions if you don't mind. I was just wondering, do you feel like your daughter still faces the same challenges? Has there been any progress since you've been at school? And do you still run those kind of events you mentioned where you kind of get the community together to like play sport?
Yeah, so with my daughter, she's got a totally different experience, totally. I mean, she's got groups of friends, multiple friends. She says she hasn't got any friends, but then I'm always hearing, Maria, hi, how are you? But if you look at her friend base, she's got a friend, she's got English friends, she's got African friends, she's got a friend from Lebanon, she's got a Turkish friend. So they're extremely from all over the place. And when she goes swimming, nobody looks at them, because if you look at the swimming lessons, she's on stage 3 now, there's so much diversity. And for me, that's one of the attractive things about Milton Keynes now, is because it's such a diverse community that you can just go about your business and nobody looks twice. There are the occasional people who come from outside, funnily enough, who will reference some really old 80s racist term, and you kind of look at them and think, go back to your town. You know, you don't belong in Milton Keynes. You know, wherever you're from, you just don't fit here anymore. So it makes me very happy that I don't have to watch my children struggling through that. Yeah, they have the usual, you know, peer tuggles, and that's just part of growing up and adolescence and everything else. But no, very, very different experience. With regards to your second question, so right now I'm not doing anything, but because I have taken my daughter to swimming lessons, it's prompted me. Actually, this has been sitting on the back of my mind for a long while to think, actually, I need to become a swimming instructor. So that's my next thing. I'm going to book, it's a 4-day course. I've looked into it. So as soon as I get my new bank of holiday, I'm going to be a swimming instructor, and I'm going to target specifically minority women to try and get in the pool and get them skills, because it's a life skill. And I've had chats with him, swimming instructor, and he said there's a real gap for it. We can't even find female Muslim swimming instructors either. So yeah, that's my next plan. Let's hope it pays off and works.
That is just brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And do you know, Roxana, when you were talking as well, I really feel that there's a PhD in here for you as well. If you haven't already thought about it, the whole Muslim women in sport thing, Muslim women in swimming, even more so. Like you could really inform, I think, government policy and practice in terms of how we encourage Muslim women to get into support and what the barriers are, because it isn't that deficit model, is it? It's actually about the structures that are holding people back. So thank you for that. There are some questions in the chat box. So
do you want to jump in? Should I?
Yeah, go for it.
Excellent. Okay, so we've got one from Aisha, and she's asking you, Dev, from your approach, it's clear that you would have done the same thing if you had girls, but within South Asian culture, there is discrimination against girls regarding education. What messages can we give out in that aspect?
Yeah, it is unfortunate that still happens. Aisha, I'm aware of it. I think the message has to be just grow up. That world is moving on. It's depriving not only. I think the fundamental issue is that by not letting girls pursue what they want to do, parents are depriving them of self-expression, what they can do with life, remove their, they could remove their dependence in post-marriage or in partnership from the other males in society. So I think that is too much of a taboo to talk about even today. When you challenge some of these things, people are less willing to listen. I must say it has improved. Our message has to be that it is their right, that they decide their destiny and journey, and we should be only supporting them in that, just as we do with the rest of the community, with boys and other. So my message would be to parents that, look, you are doing children, particularly girls, if you're not letting them pursue what they want to do with their life, be in education or work. And obviously, it is desirable for society also. I was reflecting on Ruxana's article, which maybe we'll discuss later. It does cost society, world, if you don't have enough participation from both genders and all people in the society. So please don't do that. Let them flourish. As a parent, you are doing injustice to your own role if you are doing it by not allowing girls to flourish in their life. It is, I think, irresponsible to control them.
Yeah, I think it's
control their choices.
Really interesting question, isn't it, Dev? And I think you're absolutely right about it being limiting. And I know, because you're obviously talking from your experience of boys, but Roxana, what do you feel in terms of because you said you've obviously got your daughter, how do you feel about that question? What are you doing differently to sort of break those barriers?
100% everything I can. I wear a scarf. She doesn't. I'm not going to say to her, right, you have to wear a scarf, because number one, she'll have to face the racist issue. And number two is she's got to come to her own conclusions. You know, I've exposed her to as much as I possibly can as a parent with the tools I have. And I have pushed her into going in. I mean, she's 14 now. She'll be 15 tomorrow. So whatever so she's done, she's gone dirt biking, she's done you know, all the sports, ice skating, swimming, she's learnt piano. So for some of our for Pakistanis in particular, I don't know, I haven't seen many Pakistani children in her piano lesson, but she's just said to me also, and she said to me the other day, it's quite interesting, because she said, Mummy, I'm so happy that, you know, you've pushed me, you've supported me to do whatever I want practically. And it's about having that relationship. You know, one of the things I think children are so, it's really sad in some ways. Our society today doesn't let children grow up. They expose them to adult content from a very young age. You know, we're expecting these children to grow up tomorrow, and they should have that moment as a child. So very early on, I think when just before she entered high school, I gave her, and it was an uncomfortable thing for me, I gave her about 10, well, I had a discussion with her basically, but I drilled it into her. The first thing I said to her, now this might be controversial, is when you go to school, people will say things to you, and people, you know, boys might say they love you and whatnot, and you might get distracted by this, and others might force you into these. I exposed her to some realities quite quickly. I said, look, but you are an independent person. You've got the support of your parents. You know, my husband, he's very, you know, do everything as well. And my dad, we were 4 girls, and my brother as well, but we didn't feel any different, because my dad was like, girls can do everything that boys can do. So I think that was in me already. But I said, look, you've got the whole world in front of you. Do whatever you can, you know, do whatever you want within the reason of don't hurt anybody, don't damage yourself, respect yourself, and live a full life. And she is where she is. You know, the big next challenge, and I was going to ask Dev about this. So she's got this whole board of opportunities, and I've not said to her you need to be a doctor or a lawyer or any of that, because I'm not one, probably. But is where do you start? Where do you start? Because you've got degree apprenticeships. You know, she's going into her GCSEs next year, and at some point she's got to sit down and look what's available to her. Students these days do not get any sort of career support. We haven't had any sessions about future careers. You know, where do you start? How do you do this? And as you said, Dev, a lot of South Asian parents, you know, I remember my dad saying, right, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a lawyer, just because of that was his perception. And I think it could have been the Asian thing. Or the other thing I think it could have been is that if you don't have knowledge, if you don't have power, then you're more likely to be discriminated against. And I think education is something that elevates your ability to proceed and move forward. And so that's where I am right now with her.
Thank you, Ruxana. And again, both of you have talked a lot about the importance, I think, of role modelling. I think that's something that's really come across really strongly, and how socialisation has such an impact on the children that we're bringing up, and challenging those stereotypes as well. And I think they're really kind of strong messages. And I think Arosha posted in the chat box earlier about sort of how having parents who have already gone through a system as well, so having parents who have got graduate outcomes already encourages you then to kind of follow in their footsteps, because they've broken down the structural barriers in those areas, which might be why people go into those professions. And I think what that's talking a lot about is how important capital is. So you're giving your children that kind of social and cultural capital for them to go on and succeed, which I think, you know, there's so many really important messages coming out from the stories that you're sharing. I just wondered if you wanted to respond, Dev, to Ruxana's question there about where do you start? Ruxana, have you frozen? Are you still there?
Yeah, and a couple of interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I think they're both frozen. Maybe they should pop out.
I don't know if it's the heat. I was worried it's me at my end. Oh, Dev's come back. Dev's back.
No.
Yeah.
Dev, you still there?
Okay. Can you hear me, Rehan?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
we
can
can.
hear you. Yeah.
Can you? Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you. I don't know whether my video is there, but yeah, there are a couple of interesting questions in the chat also. I'll try to look at, maybe it is my response is going to be linked to what Arusha mentions, actually, Ruxana, that we think that there's a playbook out there we could use as parents in guiding children or our growing children about future choices. Unfortunately, in my view, there is no playbook that will work in next 20 years. Whatever our own personal experiences have been as role models from, as Arusha says, that tried and tested methods, then go for those professions. Because the world is changing in the workplace as well as otherwise. So I would be reluctant to present a template or a playbook that works for general, guidance as a general guidance. I would rather work with, and they are very clever, very intelligent. They are growing fast, absorbing a lot of things when they are teenagers. They are meeting a lot of people. Say that, look, there is this ambiguity out there now, and we are talking about lifelong learning for now, not for nothing, because whether you look at a profession or a business, the set of skills, type of knowledge you would come to use in your career, whatever be that self-employed, employed, or business, is likely to need some kind of refreshment every 5-7 years. I mean, I've been in teaching. I started on blackboard, literally the blackboard, not the technical blackboard, but actually chalk and board. And we know where we have come in teaching profession. So start with acknowledgement of the liquidity of the modern life, professionally and otherwise, and hence be prepared to be learning all the time different things as the work or society presents opportunities and challenges. And I think that recognition is very important. So the dialogue should be around that. I can give you an example. Yesterday, I was sitting down with my younger son. He was choosing the courses for third year, and he's doing BSc Economics. And then we were just going through the list, and I was looking at learning outcomes and the content, and we're just having casual conversation. He had, decided 3-4 modules he wants to do, but then he was saying, I don't know others. So I said, okay, let's look at and what are those. And we discussed about independent study and what kind of skills that would give him compared to a taught module and so on. So it is those kind of conversations that help them rather than making choice for them or nudging them towards particular choice. Same happened with the elder one. So he ended up doing astrophysics, one master's, then he joined PhD in Toronto. He left that halfway because Cambridge and Oxford got interested in his profile. So he came and did PhD in Oxford, completed that. But then after PhD, he said, I don't want to be on treadmill forgive me, physicist colleagues, if we are here in the mix, that lecturerships in good universities are very difficult to get by in physics. And he was not prepared to give 10 years to postdoc kind of work. And he chose to work in the consulting industry, first in an IT enabled company called biotechnology company, and then now in a consultancy industry. But that is choices he's making. And every place I have given him my view of those sectors. Okay, that what I think I know about those sectors, what is the kind of work-life balance you will have, what kind of people you will work with. So in terms of specific advice, Ruxana, if I can give, I'll go back to my teenage when I was choosing what to do. So I started by doing what I don't want to do. Okay, so I came from trading background. My family was traders, and that was understandable. So I started making list of what I don't want to do. So I chose not to do chartered accountancy because I thought in Indian context, chartered accountancy means you are most of the time dealing with people who want to avoid tax, paying tax, and others who want to collect tax. I didn't want to be in between them. I didn't want to be police officer because, again, in my understanding of police work in India was dealing with bad people all the time. I didn't want to deal with bad people all the time. So I made a list of what I don't want to do. It grew so big that there was nothing left for me to do. Only teaching had not appeared in that list for some reason. So I ended up there. So I don't know whether I have answered your question, Ruxana.
Brilliant.
There was a question.
That's a good start, Dev.
That's a brilliant start, Dev. I love your rationale behind basically thinking about where you don't want to be is a really good starting point, isn't it? I'm going to hand to Sas because I think we've got, please, Sas, go for it.
Excellent. Okay, so we'll do two, and that'll be for you both, Fidel. I mean, that'll be for you both, Dev and Rukhsana, and they come from Fidel and Andrew. And so the first one from Fidel is, he's asking, any thoughts on how to support ethnic minority children in filling gaps in their history, education, amongst other things? In his experience, the second generation Black and minority ethnic people tend to have a crisis of identity. They have to balance feeling included on the one hand and excluded on the other hand. So that's the first one. I'll move to the next one as well and see if you guys can answer both of those. And the next one's from Andrew. He's an academic in maths and stats, and he was really interested in the point about the stereotyping of Asian people as being good at maths. To what extent do you think that comes from faulty cultural assumptions of how Asian children are brought up, and how much do you think that comes from faulty and, in this context, racist reasoning about mathematics skills being something you're either born with or without?
Okay, so regarding the first question, Fidel's question, briefly, Fidel, I would not force feed historical knowledge to my children. I think they need to appreciate that in the context. So one thing we've done is we've gone to India every year, and that is not because I want them to have knowledge of history or India's past, but more to meet parents and grandparents and so on, and to retain some cultural, linguistic bondings, which are great. They have retained. I feel very delighted when my elder son speaks to my mother in language that she understands, for example. So I wouldn't force feed that. And I think it has to be very carefully managed in the curriculum sense also, that where you expose, how you expose, because history can be presented in a very biased manner and it can create problems. So I think celebrating festivals, talking about the stories in a way that is not coming from a victim's point of view without you losing the seriousness of it. For example, I have several times talked about slavery on our dining table, but in a very interesting way. So I talk about sugar when I take sugar, and I don't take sugar now in tea, but when I used to. But only 3 days ago, this came up. We had one of my ex-PhD students. He's from Pakistan. He was visiting me with his family, 3 young children, lovely children. And we were talking about, so they were studying Rio in the school. And I said, do you know something about Rio? And she knew about favelas. I was bowled over. And this is a 10-year-old girl. I said, you know about these sugar balls in Rio? She said, no. Then I started talking about sugar and how growing up sugar required a lot of labor, and how the European imperial powers then took a lot of slaves from Africa and other places to just grow sugar. And then we talked about slavery. And that is one way for her to appreciate the interconnectedness of the social and economic phenomena that may then lead to very sad outcomes, which was slavery. But actually, it was the economic logic of labor force that was not present, and European imperial powers needed labor force for sugar canes. And indeed, a lot of Sikhs that you see in Birmingham, they were brought in as a bonded labor for growing potatoes. So when you talk about those in that context, it is not seen as a kind of complaint, but more of a historical understanding, context-based understanding of some of the past mistakes that human race has made. I wouldn't elaborate more on that, just to conserve time for other 2 questions and Rukhsana to comment. So the question about whether there is anything superior in Asian genes, I don't think there's anything more mathematical or less mathematical across races. It is more of, I think it is the tendency to do more disciplined homework that people like. So first few years when we came here, my wife's biggest complaint with the schools was that they were not giving the boys enough homework. She had grown up in a school where a lot of homework was given. So I think it's a practice. It is practical understanding around what you discuss. So again, I believe a lot of non-curriculum, pedagogically quite informal settings of discussing numbers or shapes and so on might help, but I don't think there's anything superior which can be attributed to us being South Asians and therefore good with numbers. I have seen some really poor numerically poor students across 15 years that I taught in India. The distribution would not be very different in UK, I think. The final question was, Risas, please remind me.
Well, there is another one, but we thought we'll just have these two for now, and then we'll jump once you guys have had a chance to answer. So yeah, I think you're saying maybe it's based on kind of faulty cultural assumptions. Sounds like you might.
I think it is more about assumptions rather than reality.
Thank you, Deb.
Some more stereotypes, really, if anything, aren't they? They're more stereotypes.
Yeah.
And Rikshana, do you have some answers for those couple of questions?
Yeah, so for the first one, mine's a bit of an odd situation because my husband was born in Pakistan, but I was born here. So when my parents used to take us to Pakistan a lot, and I've visited all over the country, that used to be the summer holiday. So for my children, I haven't really taken them there. But the way that I took lots of videos, lots of pictures, and my husband's family are all all over the place, but they're not in Pakistan anymore. He's only got one sister, so it's not something we need to go back for, if you see what I mean. We don't really have many relatives there. But the way that I give the children heritage is really to show them pictures, describe what the country is. There are some extremely beautiful places in Pakistan, but I, like Dev, always have a political discussion to open up to my children, and they get fed up of me, but I will talk about, the Pakistan-India divide, because before British rule came in, they used to get on, and now they don't. And, these factions have come up, and these other political agendas cause pain to both sides. And I try to tell them exactly what has happened in the past. And I think parents, we could probably do an exercise where parents could get together and talk about how are they bringing their children up, how are we filling in the gaps, because quite frankly the curriculum doesn't give you much. It's very pigeonholed, bespoke, it's very steering, it doesn't want to be controversial, it doesn't really want to face the truth. And that I think is the reality. We need to give our children the truth of what's happened. We need to tell them about slavery, how countries have been divided, how two religions, for example, Islam, the Shia and the Sunni, have been, there's a line that goes down, none of them get on, they really hate each other. That narrative in the media. I always tell my children, if something is bothering you, challenge it. Don't just take that person's older than me, therefore it must be correct. Challenge everything. Go and question. Don't just believe somebody's told you something. Go and find out for yourself. And I hope that's rubbing off of them, because I always go on about it. With regards to the maths and stats one, I think, okay, so Dev's from India. I'm, my heritage is from Pakistan. And I would say that it's probably Indians do have that notional, they're brilliant at maths. The Pakistanis, they work hard on getting tutoring. That's the sort of perception. And they will go into math. They will, become lawyers and doctors and whatnot. I don't know if it's hereditary. I think it's just built into the process, really. I think, okay, that the parent is good at maths. I remember sitting down and asking my dad once, and he was an engineer. He had an engineer mind, about division, and he went through this hour process of long division. And I remember sitting there going, please just give me the answer. So he had that in there. I don't know if it's from the teaching or whatnot. But I think England is probably worse at maths in the world anyway, teaching maths, I suspect. I think other countries are much better at it.
And I can echo that. Even I'm terrible at maths, and much again to the disappointment of my parents, which I know came up as another question about how do you manage that disappointment and how do you kind of start to break that for children. But we literally have 5 minutes left, and what I'd really like to do, if I may, is come to you first, Roxana, and sort of say, what do you feel is your main takeaway that you want people to have from today's kind of session about not just your article, but some of those issues that we've talked about and raised here, and hopefully raise the profile of some of the challenges as well as the joys of being South Asian in the UK are?
I think the takeaway would be, look at the individual person you come across, and really you can't pigeonhole them. You can't say, right, you're from there, you must be like that, or you're from there, you must be like that. Really get talking about people's heritage, where they come from, what they value, because it's only by dialogue that we can promote cohesion and understanding. And, you know, I get judged all the time because I wear a scarf, but once people get talking to me, they realise actually there's more to her than just her scarf, and that's what I would just promote.
That's lovely, and thank you, Roxana. So that idea of being inclusive and seeing people as individuals, really. Dev, the same question to you. Is there anything that you'd like to reflect on, anything from today that's been talked about, or any particular takeaway that you think is important for people to have?
I think two things I would say. One is if this in future reaches to any South Asian parents, this program in whatever form, my appeal to them, please do not interfere with girls' life, give them support and support their freedom to pursue what they want to. And the second point is appearances are so superficial way of discriminating or identifying cultural traits or associating anything with the person, as Roxana was saying. So I think in 21st century, let appearances become irrelevant, please, when we talk to each other across cultures.
Yeah, again, so poignant. And I think that idea of it's not just stereotypes that we have from others, but it's also stereotypes we have within our own communities as well that we need to be challenged. And I think, Roxana, you kind of said, you know, it's our duty to sort of, you know, just because somebody's older than you, it's not about letting that go unchallenged, but it's about challenging these stereotypes in whatever environment you're in. We're coming to a close now, and I'd just like to wholeheartedly thank both you, Dev, and Roxana for being here today and for the articles that you've written. Also to Sudesh, who sadly couldn't be with us today, but I know that his article again resonated quite deeply with some of my own experiences. And if you did want to carry on the conversation, please do feel free to email any questions to me and I can pass them on. I'd also like to thank Babette and Yosra for supporting the event, and Sas, of course, for putting together the event planning as well. Would anybody like to have a final word? Shona.
Shona, you can unmute yourself now.
Sorry, thank you. I was speaking to myself. I just wanted to say an enormous thank you to everybody that you've just mentioned, and of course yourself, Rohana. It's just been such an interesting time, so many insights, and I just want to really thank Dev and Roxana and everybody for contributing. It's been really brilliant. So thank you for taking the time to put this on, and I hope there'll be something in next year's celebratory month. So yeah, just an appreciation, really.
Thank you, Shona, and please do go and have a look at the South Asian Heritage Month website, but also Open Learn and the Race and Ethnicity Hub as well, because there's lots of other articles that have been created for us that are posted there as well. So Shona and Parvati have also contributed. But if your mics are well, if you're not disabled, if we could just give our two panel members, please, a round of applause. You can do that by reaction, then that would be really lovely. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Rohana, for chairing.
Take care.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And you, Karen.